formal sector it's beginning to improve, and it's more about data, and the states, as far as we know, are doing a lot to try and capture that informal sector. While bulk of the revenues the state generates still from the formal sector.
In terms of the lessons from Lagos State, what is done so far, what lessons do you think are there in terms of revenue management or generation to start with, then to manage those resources to deliver social infrastructure projects to the people, and not just for the state, for everyone who do business with the state or who visit or who live there or whatever?
I think there's a lot to be learned. I mean, I'll probably defer more to the state itself. I think they might have someone better to discuss in detail around that. But from the little that we know, it's a lot to be learned. Like I said, there's a lot of enforcement. There's a lot of compliance also with a lot of corporates and individuals within the state. And I think citizens within the state also have seen the progress of what the government is doing within. I mean, you drive around, you see the roads being worked on, you see a lot of projects being developed from, go to the mainland, go to the island. So I think a lot of citizens, a lot of residents of the state appreciate what the state is doing, and I think whenever there is a demand or request for people to pay taxes or to do what they need to do, they willingly oblige to do so.
But the recent flooding was a major one for Lagos in terms of what happens in Victoria Island, Lekki,
sure.
Ikoyi and all that axis. So you think what the state government could do more in terms of urban planning?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate what happened during the rainy season. I think the state has really addressed that and gave reasons and what they're doing to fix such situations. It's definitely a lesson learned, definitely a flashpoint in a situation. But I don't think it's something that you can definitely hang and say this is peculiar to the state. But as far as I know, the state has put in place measures to prevent that from happening. And like I said, that whole area, if you commute on that area, there's a lot of construction going on, and that could have been a factor in the incident that we saw a few weeks ago.
Are there other state governments approaching Chapel Hill, Denham, and say, look, we love what is going on in Lagos. We want to have a bit of this action?
Yeah, we've seen people reach out to us, to reach out to some of our peers in the industry, and there's a huge demand to tap the debt capital markets. But I think one of the few things is to understand how fiscally responsible are the states, what kind of structures do they have in place to repay investors. I can create a product and try and market and sell it, but if it's not structured well, or if the state itself doesn't have the wherewithal to pay investors back, it will not be successful. So I think our experience and what we've done with Lagos State is something that we've tried to apply when we're advising other people also in regards to trying to come to debt capital markets.
You talk about fiscal responsibility. That's a very major issue. Sure. The IMF pointed to it, the states of the fiscal deficit of a number of Nigerian state governments. Then in the last couple of weeks, the new DMO chief, Patience Onia, says, look, state governments will no longer be allowed to use their FAC allocation as a collateral for borrowing. What does that sound to you?
I mean, it's going to be very difficult, and what we see with Lagos State, right? So a portion of FAC goes into the ISPO, but on the other end of things, Lagos also taps into its IGR to fund the CDSA account. So it will probably drive states to look for other ways to raise money. And I keep on talking about IGR, but it's very important that, and that's one of the good things about Lagos is that it's not correlated to the sovereign, to oil prices. Your last guest talked about oil prices and how the country is really dependent on oil prices. Last 2-3 years, particularly last year, when the economy went down, Lagos State's revenues went up. And a big portion for other states is FAC allocation, and FAC allocation is highly dependent on oil prices. So when oil went down, FAC also went down. For Lagos State, about 70% of the total revenues is from IGR. So it went up. So even when oil prices went down, the states were still showing strength in revenues. So I think a lot of states need to look within and try to see how they can, mimic or replicate what the Lagos State government has done. And I think the new initiative from the DMO around, not depending on FAC as collateral to raise debt will be come out to light and say, listen, you need to definitely look at other options to raise money.
A quick one. The 85 billion issuance that was concluded a few days ago, what's it really going into?
I mean, it's mostly social and fiscal infrastructure that's existed. You know, and I guess I keep on saying, all you need to do is drive around Lagos. You know, I call it Crane City. There's a lot of cranes everywhere, a lot of construction trucks around. There's a lot of work going around. So some of this is going to, most of it's going to use to fund all these projects. So from schools to roads, there's a big drive to get the waterfront channelized. So there's a lot of dredging so that they can bring in ferries to aid the transportation situation in Lagos. Transportation on the road, BRTs, trains. So there's a lot of hospitals. So there's a lot of projects that's ongoing right now within the state that the proceeds will be used to fund.
And then one very major conversation is the dominance of the sovereign entity, Nigeria itself, within the domestic borrowing market. So talk to us about that and how much of what Lagos is borrowing is coming in from local investors, and we have foreign investors who says, we like what Lagos is doing. I'm living in California, but I'm putting money in Lagos State because I just love it.
Yeah. So right now, this particular issuance, 100% local. We have about 50 to 54% from the pension fund industry, another 35% from banks, and we have a mix of insurance, trustees. So 100% local. It's something I'm sure in-house will probably decide to look and see if foreign investors might take a look at it. But right now, it's still mostly a local game. And I mean, pricing. You talked about the sovereign pricing. We saw just because the sovereign has been coming to the market. I mean, look at the yield curve; it's highly inverted and that really affected pricing in regards to this particular issuance.
We have about a few minutes after the break.
Sure.
We're going to talk a little bit more about Nigeria's total debt portfolio and if we are overborrowing one way or the other. Okay, that's a conversation already on the street. I'm sure you have some answers. Let's come back after the break to Larry Boluro from Chapel Hill, Denham.